Donetsk region. Ukrainian soldiers noticed two infantry fighting vehicles in turtle configuration moving towards Ukrainian positions. Artillery started targeting them. One of the vehicles hit a mine but continued moving. After traveling a few dozen meters, it hit another mine, which proved fatal. The vehicle exploded and started burning. In this assault, the Russians deployed 6 units of equipment. As you can see, the assault failed. Ukrainian fighters with javelins and FPV drones successfully thwarted the Russian plans. Among the destroyed equipment, you can notice another turtle tank, armored with metal plates. To completely destroy it, several kamikaze drones were launched into the air, one of which strikes the tank from behind. Another locates the tank's weak spot and delivers a blow, after which the tank is finally immobilized and unlikely to be evacuated. This Russian turtle tank stands motionless in the middle of a field. From the kamikaze drone's camera, which is equipped with a cumulative projectile, you can see that it likely hit a mine because one of its tracks is completely destroyed. The first drone strikes. The second drone was directed at a weak spot, a gap between the metal structures. It skillfully completes the task, after which a fire starts. After a while, the fire intensifies and the tank burns down. This tank was rushing to assault Ukrainian positions. It was met with fire from the tree line. One accurate shot forced it to stop forever. The turtle tank was hit and attacked by drones. They fly into the hole at the back of the tank under its armor covered with metal protection. The first drone strikes. The second drone flies into the same spot. The third drone delivers such a powerful blow that it causes the tank to catch fire. The driver abandons the vehicle and runs away. And what is left of the tank will most likely be finished off by FPV drones. Let's return to the battlefield. In this case, the turtle tank fulfilled its mission. It delivered the assault group and returned unscathed. However, Ukrainian soldiers tracked it. They located its parking spot in one of the hangars and destroyed it along with the tank. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance detected another tank with metal armor in the field. An FPV drone approaches the target but does not strike immediately. It circles around to assess the situation and notices that the tank's track is damaged. A decision is made to finish off the vehicle. The drone accelerates and strikes the tank's cannon. Another drone is launched, which circles behind the tank and strikes the engine. The next point to note is that the turtle tank moves through open fields, which are usually mined. To protect the tank's running gear, a KMT-7 mine roller is attached to it. In this video, you can see a T-72 tank fitted with one of these mine rollers. The tank is also armored with metal sheets and an additional grid made of rebar. Combined with the mine roller, this significantly increases its weight. The engine is clearly not designed for such an overload. Just listen to how it sounds. You can also notice that, in addition to the mine roller, an EMT electromagnetic attachment is mounted. This attachment creates a magnetic field in front of the tank, with an intensity that ensures mines detonate 4 to 6 meters ahead of the tank. Now you can see real footage of a turtle tank moving across an open field, which is likely littered with mines. It has a similar plow attached, which it uses to drive over the mines. Look at the powerful explosions with pieces of metal flying in all directions. Sometimes they do save the equipment and crew, as you can see in this footage. The tank did not sustain serious damage and continued moving. But in most cases, it goes like this. The tank was completely destroyed. The detonation was so powerful that its turret was torn off and thrown to the side of the road. Once the fire is out, only scrap metal will remain. The same thing happened during the recent offensive on Kharkiv. A column of various equipment was destroyed, including the Frankenstein tank, which, like the rest, was destroyed by FPV drones. This video is from a Russian workshop. After instances of turtle tanks being destroyed, they decided to weld on these additional elements. They believe these will protect the weak spot where kamikaze drones often hit from a steep trajectory. This video clearly demonstrates the effectiveness of their innovation. The turtle tank is burning. A moment later, it explodes violently. Tiny pieces of molten metal fly tens of meters. After the explosion, a fire breaks out, and eventually, the tank is completely destroyed. The reason drones can approach equipment with EW systems without interference is the signal range. Ukrainian forces operate on a wide range of signals, selecting frequencies that the EW systems cannot jam. In this video, you can see the successful operation of a new development by Ukrainian forces, a homing drone. You can see a square that captures and locks onto the target. Even if the Russian EW system disrupts the drone's communication, it will continue to stay locked on the target and eventually strike it automatically. The turtle tank will be reduced to a heap of burnt metal, as you can see in these photos. From the drone camera, we can observe a frontal collision between a kamikaze drone and a Frankenstein tank. One hit might not destroy it, but it will likely cause panic or even force it to stop. Several more drones were launched against it. From one of their cameras, it's evident that the tank's metal armor has almost disintegrated and is no longer serving any purpose. Eventually, it met the fate of other similar machines. Chasiv Yar. A Russian IFV is moving across the field to assault Ukrainian positions. Artillery is firing at it. Behind it is a tree line where Ukrainian soldiers are positioned. They launch a javelin. The missile hits its target precisely, ending the assault before it even begins. Now you can see equipment covered with construction materials, thin metal sheets that flew in all directions from the drone strike. It's unclear what the Russians were expecting. The video shows how FPV drones deal with this type of armor. The equipment is completely destroyed.
There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely soldiers of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade successfully destroyed a Russian infantry fighting vehicle using the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The video reportedly begins with a Russian infantry fighting vehicle moving across an open area in the opposite direction. It is clear that the assault on Ukrainian positions was not successful, and Russian equipment was forced to retreat. The Ukrainian military assessed the situation and realized that they needed to act quickly and decisively. They prepared the Javelin anti-tank system and took aim at the infantry fighting vehicle. The rocket was launched, and the tension increased with every second of flight. Viewers of the video could see the missile rapidly approaching the target. A few moments later, a powerful explosion is heard and the missile accurately hits the infantry fighting vehicle. As a result of the hit, a powerful explosion occurs, which causes serious concussion among the BAMP crew members. One of the Russian soldiers apparently suffered the least and managed to evacuate. The rest of the crew tried to drive the car closer to the forest belt, but at that moment the ammunition began to detonate and another explosion occurred. As a result, 2 crew members remained in the vehicle and 1 managed to escape. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, soldiers of the 36th Separate Marine Brigade Bears from the unit Griffin 501 successfully neutralized the threat posed by a Russian mortar of 120 mm caliber. It is reported that the video provided by the fighters begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording a Russian mortar crew working at a position hidden in one of the local residence areas. The footage shows Russian troops loading shells into a mortar and preparing for another shelling of Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian Marines decided not to waste time and immediately began to neutralize the threat. An FPV drone was launched towards the enemy position. The video shows the drone flying over a field, bushes and trees until it reaches its target. At this moment, the drone is seen approaching the mortar position and crashing into it with high precision. The drone recorded the aftermath of the attack, showing debris from the mortar and explosion craters scattered around. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, fighters of the Ukrainian unit of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated an alternate attack on 2 Russian vehicles with military personnel using FPV drones in the vicinity of Robotino. The video reportedly begins with footage captured by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. He records the movement of the Russian loaf with the military, which is driving along a field road. Russian soldiers were heading from a combat position to the rear to regroup. However, their plans were thwarted thanks to the intervention of Ukrainian fighters. A Ukrainian FPV drone crashes into a Russian car at full speed. As a result of the collision, a powerful explosion occurs, which sets fire to the loaf's gas tank. The car instantly catches fire and glows like a match. The fire engulfs the vehicle, leaving the Russian military with little chance of escape. The next episode of the video shows an attack on a Russian pickup truck in which there were 3 military personnel. An FPV drone attacks a pickup truck, causing an explosion. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction. Namely, the fighters of the Gryphon Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Unit 501 demonstrated an impressive moment when 6 Russian armored vehicles tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line in the vicinity of Avdiivka. The video reportedly begins with footage of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle firing at Ukrainian positions. Suddenly, a Ukrainian FPV drone flies into this armored vehicle, causing a powerful explosion and destruction of the vehicle. The next episode shows a similar attack, where an FPV drone attacks an infantry fighting vehicle that is trying to take cover in the forest. As a result of the strike, the armored vehicle is also destroyed, and one of the crew members manages to leave the vehicle at the last moment. The video then shows 2 Russian tanks paired together attempting to break through the Ukrainian defense line. One of the tanks becomes a target for an FPV drone, which flies directly into the area of the gas tanks. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely fighters of the Gryphon Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Unit 501 successfully destroyed the Russian Dugout. As a result of an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone, the Dugout burned down along with the Russian military personnel located there. The video begins with footage of a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, which captures 4 Russian soldiers sitting in trenches on the left side. Another Russian soldier appears in the frame, heading towards his dugout. Literally 15 minutes later, the Ukrainian military launches an FPV drone in the direction of the Russian dugout, where all the military from the trenches have already gathered. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment of destruction of several units of enemy multiple rocket launchers Hurricane and the moment of detonation of ammunition near the destroyed enemy equipment. It is reported that the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed a video shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found the target, corrected the fire on it and recorded the result, namely powerful explosions with the scattering of shells from the Uragan multiple launch rocket system. In the first episode, a column of military equipment of the occupiers stopped on the road in the captured settlement. There were 3 arrivals, as a result of which the first 5 cars burned down. Then a battery of multiple launch rocket systems Hurricane with escort vehicles and ammunition was busy near the forest plantation. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit demonstrated exceptional skill using anti-tank mines to destroy unusual targets, which were already nicknamed barn tanks. This new phenomenon comes as Russian tanks are being lined with a variety of building materials, from chain link mesh to metal fragments and roofing materials, in an attempt to improve their protection. The video reportedly begins with one of these barn tanks at full speed trying to break through the Ukrainian defenses. The footage shows how a massive car covered with different materials rushes across the field. But its movement abruptly stops as the tank is simultaneously blown up by 6 anti-tank mines installed by Ukrainian soldiers. Powerful explosions instantly stop the tank. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit demonstrated the moment of destruction of a Russian armored KAMAZ truck of the Mustang model, transporting personnel and provisions near the village of Krasnohorivka. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian FPV drone trying to catch up with a Russian armored truck that was carrying 12 people from a combat position to redeployment to the rear. The drone approaches the target, finds a weak spot, and strikes the left wheel. As a result of the explosion, the wheel shatters into pieces and the truck is forced to stop. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launches a second FPV drone. This drone precisely targets the cab of the truck and strikes the driver and his passenger, who have not yet managed to leave the affected area. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers in the back realize that their lives are under threat and rush to leave the car and scatter in different directions. Following this, the Ukrainian military launches a third drone. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Russian military themselves demonstrated video footage of their unsuccessful tank assault on Ukrainian positions. Of the 6 Russian tanks, 5 were blown up in a minefield near the village of Spornoy. He hits another mine, which leads to a powerful explosion and subsequent detonation of the ammunition. A huge explosion destroys the tank and its debris scatters in different directions. In the video, the remaining tanks in the column can be seen, confused and demoralized, trying to maneuver to avoid the fate of their comrades. But the attempts were in vain. 2 more tanks ran into mines, leading to similar consequences: damage, smoke, and the need for repairs. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely fighters from the Company of Attack Unmanned Aerial Vehicles Sharp Karchesy showed the moment of the destruction of a Russian Loaf, which was transporting ammunition to artillerymen closer to their firing positions. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movement of a Russian Loaf loaded with ammunition along one of the roads in the north of the Kharkov region near the village of Globokha. The situation is such that this truck is heading towards the position of the Russian artillerymen, trying to supply them with additional shells. In the first part of the recording, you can see how a Russian Loaf rides along a road surrounded by small forest belts. It is obvious that the enemy is unaware of the impending threat. Once the truck reaches its stop and the ammunition begins to be unloaded, the kamikaze drone is released with pinpoint precision. Video footage shows the FPV drone speeding towards its target, carefully maneuvering between trees and other obstacles. Seconds later, a powerful explosion occurs, instantly engulfing the truck in flames. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, the fighters of the Ronin unit of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated a curious, and at the same time tragic incident that happened to the Russian military. In this episode, one of them tried to escape from an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone by putting a washing machine lid on his head, hoping that it would protect him. He first stood on the street and smoked, and then stood at the front door, observing the situation. At this time, his comrade was sitting inside the building on the right. The Ukrainian military assessed the situation and immediately launched an FPV drone in their direction. Sensing an approaching threat, the Russian military man hurriedly ran into the building and grabbed the first thing he could get his hands on, namely the top part of an old washing machine. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, he placed it over his head, probably believing that the metal cap would save him. Meanwhile, the second Russian soldier continued to sit pressed against the wall, without taking any action. Unfortunately, the moment of the explosion was not recorded on video. The operational situation did not allow us to raise a second drone to film from a different angle. However, it is safe to say that the attack was successful and caused damage incompatible with life. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the strike drone unit of the 100th Separate Mechanized Brigade Voron showed how. With the help of 2 FPV drones, they destroyed the positions of Russian drone operators who were launching FPV drones from this location at the positions of the Ukrainian military. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian surveillance drone capturing 9 Russian drone operators hiding in local residents' garages. They probably chose this hiding place, considering it safe and inconspicuous. The video begins with one of the Russian cameramen leaving the garage to pick up his FPV drone, which he landed near the gate. At this moment, the attack of the Ukrainian military begins. The first FPV drone quickly approaches the target and explodes, causing a massive explosion that destroys the entire structure of the garage down to the foundation. Russian operators hiding inside are trapped under the rubble. The power of the explosion was so great that the remains of the building scattered in different directions. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military showed the moment how, with the help of an FPV kamikaze drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders, from which fire was fired from a man-portable anti-aircraft missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian forces. It is reported that the video shows how a Russian military man with manpads settled in a strategically advantageous position at a commanding height in one of the multi-story buildings. This position provided them with a wide view and the ability to effectively attack Ukrainian air targets. However, they did not notice the kamikaze drone flying towards them. The video begins with a drone controlled by the Ukrainian military silently approaching the target. A drone operator using the FPV capabilities of the device to remain undetected until the last moment. The results of the attack are impressive, where 1 Russian military man was killed on the spot, and 3 nearby were injured of varying degrees of severity. The air attack not only eliminated the immediate threat to Ukrainian troops, this complex protected an important Russian military point from missile attacks by Ukrainian forces in the city of Donetsk. The video reportedly begins with a Russian OSA air defense missile system moving through the narrow private streets of Donetsk. The complex is seen likely changing its position to remain less vulnerable to detection and attack. The movement is carried out quite carefully, which indicates the importance and danger of this technique for the enemy. At some point, the WASP stops at the edge of the road, probably to carry out some manipulations or rest the crew. It was this moment that the Ukrainian military took advantage of. Quickly assessing the situation and realizing that delay could cost them a missed opportunity, they decide to attack. The video shows how the Ukrainian FPV drone begins to move towards the stopped air defense system. The drone operator skillfully guides the drone to its target, avoiding obstacles and keeping it at the lowest possible altitude to avoid detection. A few seconds later, the moment of attack occurs, where the drone crashes into the WASP, and an explosion immediately follows. Further in the video, footage is shown that shows how the Russian air defense system begins to smoke and burn. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Buleva showed video footage showing how Russian infantry was hiding in a destroyed armored personnel carrier. where they equipped an observation post from which they monitored Ukrainian positions and tracked the movement of Ukrainian equipment. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed drone footage of Russian infantry hiding in an already destroyed armored personnel carrier because there was nowhere else to hide. The Ukrainian military, using reconnaissance from drones, from time to time monitored the movements of Russian troops, who from time to time climb out of a destroyed armored personnel carrier to conduct reconnaissance activities on Ukrainian troops. Next, the attack begins with the Ukrainians using an FPV drone delivering a jewelry strike into the inside of a Russian armored personnel carrier, where the Russian military was resting. And at the last blow, the ammunition detonates. As a result, this causes a powerful explosion, as a result of which the explosion causes severe damage incompatible with life to all Russian soldiers who were hiding in the armored vehicle. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely a Russian tank breakthrough occurred where, during a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense, a Russian tank was blown up by an anti-tank mine, as a result of which the ammunition detonated. The Ukrainian military reportedly demonstrated its readiness and foresight by proactively planting anti-tank mines on a road behind enemy lines. This strategic decision was determined not only by knowledge of the terrain, but also by the analysis of intelligence information about possible enemy routes. The explosion of a Russian tank served as a striking example of the effectiveness of such security measures. The detonation of the tank's ammunition after an explosion on a mine was a serious blow to the attacking forces, preventing a breakthrough of the Ukrainian defense and damaging the enemy's combat capability. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military, with the support of the Turn Back Alive Foundation, successfully carried out an operation to destroy important Russian equipment. With the help of the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system and 2 GM-LRS missiles, it was possible to eliminate their 330 Shaitel electronic warfare complex and the ZU radar station. It is reported that the video of the operation begins with a Shark drone conducting reconnaissance and recording the positions of Russian equipment. The footage shows how Ukrainian drone operators carefully monitor the enemy's movements and transmit coordinates for striking. The electronic warfare complex or 330 Shaitel and the radar ZU are in a well-fortified position, but this does not stop the Ukrainian military. The following shows the moment the HIMARS missiles were launched. 2 high-precision GM-LRS missiles are sent to targets following specified coordinates. A few seconds of tense anticipation and a powerful explosion is visible on the screen. Namely, first one, then the second missile accurately hits the target. The Shaitel electronic warfare system and the Zupark radar are instantly engulfed in flames, which indicates the detonation of ammunition and the complete destruction of enemy equipment. Using an ordinary civilian Mavic drone, destroyed the most modern tank of the Russian army T-90 Improrov, worth $4 million. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the movement of a new Russian tank across the terrain. Russian armored vehicles are confidently moving forward, unaware that they are being watched from the air. The coordinated actions of the Ukrainian military and the use of the civilian Mavic drone made it possible to carry out this operation as efficiently as possible and unnoticed by the enemy. Further, unfortunately, the very moment of dropping the ammunition from the drone was not filmed. However, viewers can see how after some time the tank is already engulfed in flames. Due to the intense fire and dense smoke, it is impossible to see what is happening inside the tank, but apparently the crew did not have time to leave the vehicle.
Footage circulated online in recent weeks indicates that Russia is using fixed shell-like metal structures around its tanks to protect them from Ukrainian first-person view kamikaze drone strikes along the front lines. The vehicles with the protective cage have been dubbed turtle tanks, which has drawn ridicule from open-source intelligence accounts. Russia has long attached improvised armor to its tank fleet to shield the vehicles from Ukrainian strikes. Roof screens have also appeared on Russian rocket launchers. Turtle tanks have made an appearance on multiple fronts in Ukraine, including in the northeastern Kharkiv region, where Russian forces have launched a fresh offensive. Recently, an extensive network of Russian minefields halted the Ukrainian counteroffensive. As the conflict shifts into a new phase with Ukraine on the defensive against a renewed Russian offensive, the Russian forces must now face similar challenges as they deal with Ukrainian minefields. The Ukrainian minefields currently appear to be much less extensive than the Russian minefields, which were 20 kilometers deep at locations. Since the Ukrainian minefields are less formidable, Russian forces are attempting to clear paths through them. However, once the Russian forces enter the minefield, they are canalized to these cleared paths. As they proceed down these paths, they can be quickly detected by Ukrainian surveillance drones and targeted by an artillery strike. Last week, the Russians reportedly experienced minefields near Novomykhailovka in the western Donetsk Oblast, where a column of armored vehicles was destroyed by Ukrainian artillery as it attempted to pass through the minefield. Russian military bloggers have reported that Ukrainian minefields are causing similar issues along the Kharkiv-Luhansk axis. New footage appears to show the moment a modified Russian tank hits several landmines in Ukraine at a time when Moscow is trying to defend its armored vehicles against battlefield strikes. The Russian turtle tank was blown up by a few landmines at once, Ukraine's defense ministry said in a post to X, formerly Twitter, on Tuesday, attributing the brief clip to the military's shadow unit, which specializes in the use of drones and artillery. A vehicle with a metal shell can be seen making its way through a field before an explosion erupts around it. One person can be seen running away from the tank following the blast. Kiev did not indicate when and where the footage was filmed, and it is impossible to verify the clip independently. Newsweek has emailed the Ukrainian military and the Russian Defense Ministry for comments. While mines remain unpopular due to their collateral damage, they are undeniably effective at shaping the modern battlefield. The slow and meticulous process of breaching and navigating minefields exposes soldiers to enemy artillery fire, hindering the swift movement crucial for modern warfare. Last year, minefields played a pivotal role in breaking the Ukrainian counteroffensive, and this year, they are already significantly impacting the new Russian offensive. Many drones feature advanced optics that can see through smoke screens and other obscurants commonly used to hide military movements. Further, many of these systems include advanced autonomy features and long loitering times. Given that some of the mine systems can be remotely delivered from artillery shells and helicopters, the Ukrainians have been able to place minefields forward of their lines. Moreover, using drones allows the Ukrainians to maintain overwatch of these minefields even if they are forward of their lines. Suppose the Russians can push through these initial minefields and approach the Ukrainian lines. In that case, they will likely find much thicker minefields, similar to what the Russians used against the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The slow progress of the Russian assault is providing the Ukrainians with enough time to build out their defensive minefields. The Russians will likely try to mitigate these minefields by enhancing their counter-drone technology, limiting the Ukrainians' ability to overwatch the position. While Russian counter-drone technology, especially using electronic warfare equipment, is quite advanced, it is difficult to counter such a wide array of drones. Moreover, the Russians are reportedly not outfitting their tactical units with counter-drone technology. Additionally, Russia may change its tactics for breaching the minefields, including increased air support that would limit the use of Ukrainian artillery.
A similar situation befell this Russian tank. One drone was enough to set it on fire. And here are some more beautiful shots of burning Russian junk. And this T-80 was instantly reduced to molecules after encountering a drone. What idiot allowed this foolishness? Let me explain what happened here. The APC brought TM-62 anti-tank mines and unloaded them nearby. The fatal mistake was the delay. They should have retreated immediately. From the explosion, the APC did a sideways somersault. Here's another moment. Ukrainians were sure that Russian infantry was hiding here and made a precise strike on this building. And here, the Russians knew what was waiting for them, so they tried to hide. But they underestimated the skill of the FPV operator, who aimed the drone right at them. Take another look at how spectacular that was. After the occupants broke through the first line of defense, the AFU fielded an experienced 47 Mechanized Brigade, which was equipped with Western weapons and was able to stop the enemy. The situation in Avdiivka was not bad for Ukraine. They controlled the flanks, height, and presence of troops in the territory of Coke, and the chemical plant made life 10 times more difficult for the enemy. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. One more episode. One of the Russian armored personnel carriers is already engulfed in flames. The second one pulls off the road and stops? For what? The third vehicle starts moving, and at that moment, the Ukrainians hit the target exactly. Excellent work by the artillery. Novodonetsk, the Donetsk region. A Russian column moves towards Ukrainian positions. One of the tanks explodes. What do you think destroyed it? You'd be surprised. A Ukrainian tank drove alone against the column and hit the Russian enemy with an apt shot. The Ukrainians don't stop and continue to deliver blow after blow. At some point, the tank casts a thermal curtain and starts backing up. Apparently, the Russians tried to aim an ATGM at it. The Russians lose another tank. Hopefully, we'll see more of this story later. Another unsuccessful assault by the Russian army. Even after the BMP is hit, the tank continues to move forward. This is his last mistake. The assault has failed. The armored personnel carrier and the tank are destroyed. And this is already a jeweled hit from Ukrainian artillery. This Russian tank paid dearly for stopping. A precise hit from 155mm ammunition turns the tank into a piece of metal. Let's start with 2 episodes of failed assaults. 3 Russian tanks decided to attack the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. The first and the second tank are hit by the Ukrainians using ATGMs, and this Russian tank can't escape death. But let's return to armored personnel carriers and Russian tanks. More footage of the magical transformation of a Russian tank into a pile of scrap metal. The Avdiivka region. A Russian T-90M tank assaults Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. And here's a cargo truck and an armored car, Tiger. They both become easy prey for kamikaze drones. A Russian cargo truck brought ammunition to the positions, and the Ukrainians immediately destroyed it. What a pity. Now it's the turn of this Soviet junk, a T-62 tank from 1967. This is the kind of scrap the Russians are pulling to the front. Now it's the APC's turn. One grenade and $400,000 turns into scrap metal. A drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. Here are 2 Russian tanks from one of the failed attacks I showed at the beginning. The Ukrainians target a T-90 tank. This video shows the perfect performance of a 155mm smart projectile. Pay attention to the accuracy. You can clearly see the trajectory of the projectile in these shots. For example, this is the defeat of a Russian tank by a Javelin missile. There was no detonation. Apparently, it was without ammunition. Abandoned Russian equipment must be destroyed. Kamikaze drones are excellent at this task. Look how this drone neatly flies inside the AFV. Nice work. Naturally, it was not without epic explosions. This is how beautifully the Russian AFV turned into scrap metal. Also, this Russian tank. Nice bang. Another tank of militants. A Ukrainian soldier videotapes the detonation of the tank. Near Sivur. The Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? At first, I thought it was a Javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Let's return to the destruction of equipment. I've got more to show. The drone dives into its target. The APC is instantly engulfed in flames. In 30 minutes, the Russian APC was completely burned out. That's simply the amount of time it took the Ukrainians to replace the battery and return. This is a Russian tank. And this is the same tank through the eyes of a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone inspected the Russian tracked crematorium. Or take a look at this video. 5 kamikaze drones attack a Russian tank. The 5th hit becomes fatal for the Russian armor. A crater is formed in the tank's location. Can you imagine the power of that explosion? I think that after such a strike, this tank is not combat ready. As in this case. And here's another T-90, which couldn't cross a puddle and got stuck in the mud. And this is all on one section of the front. Can you imagine how many resources Russia is burning in this war? The enemy is very strong. Yes, these are tracked crematoriums, and the Russian soldiers taking part in this? Lunatics. Here's the perfect example. The incendiary mixture falls on the netting protecting the tank from grenades and bombs. The contents gradually drip onto the tank, and the flames spread to the hull. Let's move now to another section of the front where constant fighting is taking place. These two APCs were stopped by mines. After one of them explodes, another explosion occurs. Pay attention to this exact moment here. An armor plate falls on a mine, hits it, and another explosion happens. This APC was carrying ammunition to Russian soldiers at their positions. Another pair of APCs. The drone first approaches from the left side, but the hit doesn't yield the desired result. Then, the Ukrainians send a second drone. This hit becomes fatal. Both APCs are destroyed. The Ukrainians thwarted the Russians' attempt to evacuate their damaged tank. The strike drone returns with explosives to prevent such attempts in the future. The mission was completed successfully. Another Russian tank. The drone again hits the target precisely. This piece of Russian junk is also destroyed. The Russians are moving the 2S-19 Masta-S self-propelled howitzer into the forest to hide it from Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. The Ukrainians, however, see all of this. When the howitzer is securely hidden, the Ukrainians launch a HIMARS missile at it. The target is eliminated. These are the frames of the work of a Russian UAV team. A Ukrainian drone tracked a Russian reconnaissance drone and followed it to the command post. Then, the HIMARS took over. And how about this beauty? A kamikaze drone strikes an abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier. The damage causes a fire, and then an explosion. Beautiful footage of burning Russian junk. Here's another piece of Russian junk. The drone flies right inside. The fire does its job. When the drone returned, it found this. And who do we have here? This drone perfectly flies into the armored personnel carrier, and then it's the same old story. And here's another Russian tank. The operator perfectly executes the task and destroys the tank. There's another target nearby, also a tank. Watch how beautifully it explodes after the drone's hit. Another example. 2 Russian tanks were stopped by Ukrainian warriors. Ukrainians used kamikaze drones to finish them off completely. This Russian APC decided to pave its own way. Relying on luck, the APC rushes towards the trench, but explodes on mines. This venture cost the Russians another APC. In the tree line, a Russian tank stops. A fatal mistake. After the first hit, it accelerates and charges towards the Ukrainians. The second hit immobilizes it. It immediately catches fire. Take a look at these flames. The Russian tank is destroyed. The negligence of this APC became fatal. Venturing into direct fire from the Ukrainian tank, there was no escape for it. One shot, and the target is hit. Impact and explosion. This is how it looks from the tank's perspective. Such precise work deserves a thumbs up. The Russian column of tanks and APCs was spotted by the Ukrainians. They split into groups and attack from several directions at once. The first to come under fire is an APC. Next, the Ukrainians destroy a tank. This APC runs over mines. It turned into a crematorium on tracks. And this is a hit from a javelin missile. The affected tank moves about 10 meters and stops. The Russians try to flee, but run into mines. Out of the entire column, only this armored personnel carrier manages to survive. It crosses the road and gets stuck. Today, we're going to dive into this madness and try to answer the question, what's wrong with the Russian army? It all starts with the insane attacks of Russian armored groups. The crew of this tank doesn't realize it's walked into a trap. Not only are Ukrainian soldiers to the left of the tank, but there are also surprises laid out on the road ahead. By the way, a Ukrainian soldier missed the tank with an anti-tank guided missile, but the mines saved the day. Damn, these guys fight like the real elite. In parallel, the Ukrainians continue to destroy the Russian army using familiar weapons. Let's take a look at some of the work of HIMARS, artillery, and drones. A shark hits a Russian fuel tanker and several other Russian vehicles. The first artillery strike spooked the Russians, and one of the vehicles left the position. A little later, a passenger car arrived at the position to evacuate the unlucky ones. And this is the work of the National Guard of Ukraine. In this footage, you are watching the work of the Russian army's mortar crew. The reconnaissance drone is correcting the artillery strikes, and the Ukrainians' first shot hits the target and destroys it. Nice work. Nearby, the drone detects a UAV. A precise hit on the target. Fire and detonation. Shark UAV plus HIMARS MLRS is a deadly combination. Let's take a look at a practical example. First, the drone tracks down future victims. When it arrives at the parking lot, the coordinates are transmitted to the HIMARS, which in turn fires a missile at each target. As a result, the Pion, Grad, and Masta S are destroyed. The author of the video signed these strikes as HIMARS strikes on the electronic warfare R-934 Borisogledsk 2 complex near Donetsk. I'm not sure that these are HIMARS, it kind of looks more like ordinary artillery. But it doesn't change the results. The complex completely destroyed. The Russians, having come under Ukrainian fire, requested evacuation, and an armored personnel carrier moved in. The Ukrainians saw this and launched several kamikaze drones. Now the Russians have no means of transportation and are stuck in a dangerous position. A Russian BMP-2. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. Sharks tracked down an enemy location. 8 trucks, possibly for transporting personnel and ammunition. A second hit causes ammunition to ignite in one of the trucks. Vehicles nearby must have been damaged in the strikes as well. For dozens of soldiers, this day was their last. Excellent work by the reconnaissance and artillery. I don't know what the crew of this tank was doing, but they didn't do it for long. Suddenly, a Ukrainian drone knocked into the engine compartment and interrupted them. Another tank destroyed. This Buhanka was transporting weapons for Russian soldiers, but was stopped in time by a Ukrainian drone. This is a Russian Ural truck, and it has an automatic grenade launcher mounted on top. A kamikaze drone manages to hit a target that is already retreating. The second drone secures this result. Another armored personnel carrier arrives to evacuate the Russian soldiers. A third drone flies in to prevent it. Fortunately for the Russians, the drone does not reach them in time due to heavy interference. As I promised, I'm releasing part 2. Let's take a look at the madness that the Russians are engaging in. Klishchivka. At this point, the Russians have become more active and are trying to regain control of the settlement. A Russian armored strike group is moving across the fields towards the settlement. A Ukrainian drone is performing reconnaissance and adjusting artillery. Kaboom! The Russian guys are starting to have some serious problems on their hands. Ukrainian artillery begins to work the stalled column. 2 Russian armored personnel carriers are engulfed in flames. An immobilized tank stands nearby. The assault has failed. Near Soledar, Russian paratroopers went on a daring assault. A BMD moves towards the AFU positions and fires from a machine gun. A Stugna P ATGM missile hits the vehicle. The second missile kills the armored personnel carrier. The second armored personnel carrier with a paratrooper suffered no less. The Russians have resorted to a new tactic. They sent an armored group to assault during the night. The Ukrainians were scouting and did not miss the moment. A Russian tank explodes on mines. The fourth tank was damaged as a result of blowing up the previous tanks. As a result, the Russians lost 4 vehicles. The northern flank of Avdiivka. The Russian column leaves on a combat mission. The first armored personnel carrier goes to scout the road and runs into a mine barrier. The artillery hits the Russian vehicles very accurately. At some point, the Russians realize that it is madness to keep moving forward and begin to turn around. The second column advances to the assault. The Russian tank succeeds in destroying the Ukrainian mines. The second tank decides to repeat this insane challenge and turns into a pile of scrap metal. And what's this? Did HIMARS end up in the neighborhood? That doesn't stop the Russians. The third column continues to move on. Panic among the Russians. 2/3 of the armored vehicles destroyed. This leads to reckless action and more casualties. The Ukrainians sure are giving these Russians hell. 2 armored personnel carriers and 2 tanks move towards the Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians open fire and hit the armored personnel carrier. Probably they used an ATGM or a kamikaze drone. The tanks move off the road, changing the direction of their attack. The second armored personnel carrier is also immobilized. The tanks continue their attempt to flank the vehicle. They receive orders and begin to retreat, while firing on Ukrainian positions. The assault fails. The Kharkiv region. A suicidal attack of Russian tanks. The first tank, with a minesweeper, falls victim to an ATGM. It is stopped in its tracks, as well as the column that was moving behind it. The Ukrainians hit an armored personnel carrier with the second shot. A kamikaze drone flies towards the stopped column. It crashes into the tank, penetrates the armor, and leads to the explosion of the ammunition. The column is destroyed. The OSA anti-aircraft missile system is moving towards the forest to hide from the Ukrainians. As you might have guessed, the Russians didn't succeed. The Russian army's attack, meant to bring strategic success, did not go as planned. Russian tanks were blowing up, burning, and exploding again. Let's take a closer look. Tanks, APCs, and airborne troops, all ready for battle, split into small groups. The Ukrainians are using cluster bombs. An ATGM hits a Russian APC. A tank deploys troops in an open field. Now, this APC is nothing more than a meat grinder. The second group is just hundreds of meters from Ukrainian positions. They were met with a surprise left overnight. Pay attention to this synchronization. And these are the daredevils who went on solo attacks. Pure madness. The third group consists of APCs and the madmen inside of them. A precise ATGM hit stops the Russian armored vehicle, a tank, and 3 APCs. The Ukrainians are simply picking off tanks with javelins. Russian tanks are engulfed in flames. The attack goes on. APCs rush to take cover. It almost made it. But then, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the APC. Now, check out this video. This column was just decimated. Ukrainians strike with cluster bombs to destroy the enemy's manpower. It's rather effective. This APC made an unforgivable mistake. From just 10 to 20 meters away, Ukrainians destroy it with an RPG shot. Such bravery deserves a like. And here's an ATGM Stugna P missile nearly hitting a Russian APC. The Russians try to dig in at one of the settlements in the Avdiivka region. A dozen soldiers disembark on the village's outskirts. An unpleasant surprise awaits them on the other side of the village. As the soldiers leave the APC, it drives away. Notice this moment. A kamikaze drone flies over the APC. The drone continues to tail the Russian armored vehicle. The operator waits for the right moment to deliver a crushing blow. The APC is immobilized. Another Ukrainian drone strikes. The APC is destroyed. One hit was enough to start a fire. The drone returns and discovers the debris that used to be this tub. Another hero, a tank nicknamed Kuzbas. The Russians tried to protect it from all sides. And maybe it could have withstood 1 or 2 more hits from a kamikaze drone, but it couldn't save it from a grenade. The fire did its job. Kuzbas burned to ashes. In this video, Ukrainian strike drones destroy what attacked the Ukrainians during the day. First, they burned a tank. And then a group of 3 units, a tank and 2 APCs. A perfect bonfire. Another tank. Some of the ammunition detonated, but it wasn't enough to tear the tank apart. This is what it all looks like the next day. This is the same place we saw in the previous video, where the drone was finishing off the Russian tanks. Yep, sometimes all that remains of a tank is a metal husk like this. Or as these 2 APCs changed color due to the high temperature of the fire. Everything inside incinerated. And here are the tanks from the beginning of the video.